Hello, everybody. This is Michael Winterson from Equinix. Thank you very much for taking time out to have a discussion with us around the future of digital infrastructure. I'm going to run through some changes, both to us and to what we see the market, and then I'm going to touch on 3 use cases to try to bring home how the future of digital infrastructure is here, and the impacts are big and great. So let's go to the next slide, the future of digital infrastructure. Well, the first thing is it's happening. In fact, it has been happening for a few years, but as it's happening, it is turning into, at Equinix's point of view, 4 key themes that we're having to address as a business. The first one is that infrastructure is everywhere. What used to live in the corporate data center is now being shrunk, and it's being moved out of the corporate data center and put where it needs to be. We'll come to that bit in a second. What that means is the corporate data center is shrinking. We don't think the corporate data center will ever disappear. There will always be some core applications which will need to live in a corporate data center environment, but much of what is in a corporate environment could run better and operate better in a new digital infrastructure model. So that model is, first off, it's hybrid. It's not going to be any one single cloud. It's not going to be any one source. And in a lot of cases, the service might need to deploy in multiple locations. You may need to aggregate and pre-process data at an edge, whatever that edge is, a car, a stadium, an airport, a city. And then you need to then process that data and then move that data to a place where it can be computed, analyzed, worked, resourced, stored, traded. So hybrid, blending cloud and edge. It's also going to need an ecosystem of partners. There is no one company that's going to be able to do this. And so as enterprises are dealing with the enterprise of the future, they're realizing that digital infrastructure is also going to be complex. They need to procure best of breed from whichever vendor they feel is appropriate and can solve the problem for them at that time. Cloud's only part of the conversation. Edge-based services, bare metal, co-location, hosting, managed services, all of these functions are going to be required. But the last one, and perhaps the most important, is we're all going to have to recognize that digital infrastructure is going to be virtual, it has to be massively secure, and it has to be transparent. The enterprise client doesn't have time to deal with complex metrics on infrastructure. The infrastructure must support their digital business, and it needs to be controllable from end to end. So what are some of the implications? Well, the first one, and actually, if you don't mind, there's a build in this. Let's go to the build. I'm not very good at builds myself, so if you can click one more time. The first one is for every digital technology provider, we've got to understand what is our purpose. Just as every business is being challenged in this day and age as to what their digital business is going to be, we as digital service providers are being challenged heavily. What is your core purpose? To put this into perspective, 10 years ago, Equinix would have easily said that all of our business was on the core cloud side on the right of this graphic. We housed huge quantities of compute and storage. But in the future, much of this is going to move into dedicated cloud-based data center infrastructure. We don't know that we particularly are going to operate well at an edge. A lot of that is going to be managed by a mobile network operator or a last mile network. So what is our purpose? Our purpose is in the middle, where we are interconnecting the data aggregation and the data interaction points of a business's customer with that of the core cloud applications that define what that digital business is trying to become. So for us, our core purpose is to be an aggregation point for service providers and an interconnection point for enterprises on the left side of that chart. Let's move to the next slide. So our services have to change. Our first service, what everybody recognizes Equinix for, is data center services. We build and operate a very large quantity of data centers around the world. People think of us as space and power. On the top of that, though, we also have a set of interconnection services predominantly based around 2 things, a cross-connect and an internet exchange. But if businesses want to access these services, they need more. They need to be able to access the interconnection to the clouds and networks that we provide in our data centers, which is Equinix Fabric, and they need to do it virtually, which is a series of edge-based services for us. virtual firewalls, virtual routers, virtual globally based data encryption services that can manage both on-premise data encryption and all the variety of cloud data encryption services. And ultimately, potentially even scalable compute services like bare metal. Wrapping around all of that, finally, if we can go to the next click, is a digital experience. We need to be able to provide a virtual data center service instantaneously to a client. What does this mean? A traditional 12-month contract? Out the window. Daily billing? Yes. 8 to 12 weeks to deploy a rack and connect it to a network service provider in a cloud? Out the window. I need to be able to build a service and have it operating within less than 15 minutes, end to end, globally, cloud, network, and interconnection. And all of that has to be done in an easy to use portal or an API stack. This is a big, massive digital infrastructure transformation for a company like Equinix. And we see most of our technology service providers grappling with the same thing as quick as they can, because enterprises truly are starting to call the shots. And they will quickly choose other service providers if we don't make that digital transformation. We can go to the next slide. It also means something else for us. If digital infrastructure is going to be edge-based, our view of the world was around interconnection hubs in core tier 1 markets. We thought 5 or 6 years ago that 30 or 40 cities would have been adequate. We're going to have to massively deliver services in a set of cities we're not even sure if we know an end number to. But in the space of the past 4 or 5 years, we've regularly added 5 or 6 metros per year. Some of it organic. We've announced Hamburg. We've announced our 3rd zone in the GCC states with Muscat. We've announced Bordeaux to handle cable landing stations and a regional connectivity for France. We've also made acquisitions. So Bell Canada's data center services, of course, provide us 5 new metros across North America. We've also announced GPX, which is giving us a foothold into Mumbai with a rollout plan to deliver all the tier 1 markets in the Indian subcontinent. Clearly, there's more to go. We have gaps in terms of latency and performance across North America, Latin America, and parts of Southeast Asia. And the biggest elephant in the room that's missing is what is our Africa footprint? And so all of us are being compelled to look at a global solution and a global deployment. The other one is we're looking at ecosystems. We've spent 6 years getting over 170 cloud service providers to present direct connectivity solutions on Cloud Exchange Fabric. Today, we're proud that we've got one of the largest collection of clouds available on our Cloud Exchange Fabric. But on top of that, we're now partnering with our networks who traditionally weren't looking at Cloud Exchange as a delivery mechanism. But as they're deploying SD-WAN enabled services, network providers can now deploy software-defined networking services on the fabric and present them to our clients. And I'll touch on a specific use case, but I will call out some of the public statements that we've made so far, such as Verizon's STI and Telstra's SD-WAN enabled services, both available on Cloud Exchange, as well as Unitas, which specializes in providing last mile services to our client. On top of that, we're then looking at building data ecosystems, and I'm going to come back to that with one of my use cases. So fundamentally, digital infrastructure in the future is about giving the enterprise 2 things. Part 1 is giving them access to clouds, because so much of what enterprises are going to do can be provided by an infrastructure as a service provider or a platform as a service provider. And so we're going to massively try to increase and work with our cloud service providers on new direct connectivity solutions around the world. Enterprises can then extend their network into an Equinix data center, take a point of presence, put in place their security parameters and their networking parameters, and connect through Equinix Cloud Exchange Fabric to any of those clouds in any location around the world. We go to the next slide. Part 2 of the future of digital infrastructure is going out to the rest of the service provider community and addressing with them what software-defined services do they have available. And the big play on this is, of course, connecting enterprises to the edge, networks. So we're now aggressively working with our network partners on deploying SD-WAN services on Fabric, which allows enterprises to do 2 things. One, it allows them to build massively scalable networks that reach from their core data center service to cloud service providers and ultimately to last mile locations, a factory, a data aggregation point, a business office. But what's interesting is we can go one step further. If we see financial service companies trading equities in our data centers in New York and London, Chicago, Frankfurt, Tokyo, Singapore, and Sydney, why not have other enterprises directly trade data services with each other? And so today, what we're really interested in is, can we go into, say, the automotive industry and help suppliers and builders of automobiles and providers of predictive maintenance and support services interact with each other as enterprises and peers, trading data to optimize business processes in, say, the automotive industry, or the transportation industry, or the digital payments industry, or perhaps the video distribution market. We can go even further into life sciences or optimizing healthcare systems, energy, oil and gas, and mining and extraction. All of these industries have huge numbers of enterprise players who provide services with each other. And as they digitize, they're going to be trading data with each other. And the security of that data will actually be the value of the company. So let's move on. The final one is, how do I turn my data center into an entirely virtual service? So Equinix has launched a Smart Key, which means I no longer have to buy physical encryption hardware. We've partnered with all the major players in the router and firewall market. Anything that they sell as a hardware can now be bought as a network function and housed in a data center. And then finally, we've announced our acquisition of Packet, which is a bare metal service, which will allow customers to deploy any edge-based service that they would want in an Equinix data center on scalable bare metal services. So we'll jump to a couple of use cases to try to bring this home. First off, our partnership with Verizon and their SDI service. It's one of the first that we've launched, so I felt it was worth talking about. However, we expect to have over 12 networks providing very similar services before the end of this year. What's going on is Verizon wanted to do three things. The first thing they wanted to do is Verizon wanted to allow any of our 10,000 customers access to the Verizon set of software-defined services, which are all the blue elements on the right in the red box in this graphic. All of our customers are considered the gray boxes in the lower left in the red platform Equinix rectangle. That was session one. So any customer can go on ECX Fabric. If they have a Verizon license or contract, they can go on and procure connectivity directly onto the Verizon network to connect to anyone in Verizon in any method that they choose, MPLS, Internet, Ethernet, point-to-point services. On the other hand, Verizon wanted its customer base to be able to access any cloud service that was available on Cloud Exchange. Remember, 170 clouds available in 45 different locations. Verizon has direct connectivity to certain cloud providers in certain locations, but they didn't have that complete portfolio. So now they do. So their clients can now see a practically unlimited set of cloud services for whatever global requirements they might have. And finally, the third one, which is the sort of right to left movement, is Verizon customers can now present themselves into Equinix data centers. Maybe they're service providers. Maybe they have products, data-based products or digital infrastructure, which they can sell to an enterprise. And so we have three potential solutions involving zero capital. Everything's delivered via automation. All of it's on demand and integrated with an API. And if the customer wants, we can go down to daily billing, both for Verizon and Equinix. Let's go to another use case of where digital infrastructure is going to in the next slide. So here, what we've got is we've got a business-to-business company called Jabil. They do a lot of manufacturing into the medical equipment space. And Johnson & Johnson has made a business decision to sell out of some of that manufacturing process and had a partnership with Jabil and decided to allow Jabil to procure 14 factories in various different medical technology areas and domains. These factories were located in three countries: United States of America, Germany, and Switzerland. Two of those countries mapped onto the existing Jabil corporate network provided by Verizon and CenturyLink. One of them did not, Switzerland. However, what the Johnson & Johnson facilities in Switzerland did have is they all had very powerful internet connections. So what we did with Jabil is we designed a IPVPN, which brought the Johnson & Johnson facilities that were now acquired by Jabil up to Frankfurt. Jabil didn't want to deploy any capital in Frankfurt, and so they built their Palo Alto firewalls and various routers from various providers that they are using, all of which are managed by the same management tools that they've already got for their physical routers and firewalls. So they chose the brands they wanted. They chose the exact configurations that they needed. And they put those onto Network Edge, which gave the Johnson & Johnson facilities the appearance of a presence in Frankfurt. We then connected that to Cloud Exchange, and then we used the SDI example, which I just showed you with Verizon, and CenturyLink, which has a product called Bring Your Own Connection. And we connected these facilities onto the Verizon and CenturyLink Jabil backbone network, which gave access to all of Jabil's global business processes. We integrated Jabil's acquisition literally within minutes. It was a process that took them over a year to acquire, but when they made the acquisition, they had this network up and running within minutes of making the business decision to do so. Also, the contract is entirely flexible. At some point, Verizon or CenturyLink will extend their services to the factories in Switzerland, at which point Jabil can just turn this Frankfurt-based solution off with no billing penalty. So digital infrastructure, scalable, flexible, turn it on quickly, turn it off when you need it. It gives you instant connectivity for something as important as a massive acquisition. Let's go to the last use case. In this case, what we're looking at is perhaps the next generation of enterprises adopting a cloud-first policy. When people talked about cloud-first policies, they usually were picking one major infrastructure provider, and they were doing lift and shift of specific workloads and just dumping them into the cloud. In many cases, it was either to transform a capital investment into an OpEx cost, or in many cases, they just felt that it was going to be more efficient this way, and that's fine. But what's happening is, as companies are making cloud-first business decisions, they're realizing that there were certain clouds optimized for certain solutions. So let's take, for example, here, Newfarm, where clearly Newfarm runs Oracle ERP and runs a set of business processes in AWS. They wanted to move their test and dev and their pre-production Oracle systems onto Oracle Cloud Infrastructure in Phoenix. They wanted to replicate the physical connection they had from their on-premise solution with Oracle ERP to AWS and create a virtual solution for everything that was test and dev. And they did this very simply. What they did is they built in Silicon Valley a Cloud Exchange breakout point. They built a firewall and router that routed the traffic directly to Los Angeles. At Los Angeles, they picked up the Oracle Cloud Fast Connect, which is Oracle Cloud's direct connectivity service, which brought it back to Oracle Cloud Phoenix, which is where their infrastructure was located. Again, in minutes, they replicated what was a very solid physical production connection. They've now replicated for a cloud-to-cloud connectivity. So what we expect with digital infrastructure, again, is an ecosystem of providers that help companies like Newfarm build complex hybrid solutions. If we just go one more slide, I think that's going to bring me to the end. I hope this was helpful. Digital infrastructure, it's here, it's global, it's moving to the edge, it's hybrid, it's complex, and we as service providers are going to have to software define everything we do. So thank you very much, and I'll speak to you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.